Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Corey Daharsh. I'm with Advanta IRA, and my guest speaker today is Jennifer Barner. We're here to bring you real estate IRA investing as a topic with a specific emphasis for the most part on single family investing, but a little bit of foreshadowing. I know we're going to briefly touch into multifamily as well. So hopefully you're here to learn about how to use your retirement funds to invest in real estate. If not, stick around anyway. You'll get some great information from us. Again, my name is Corey Daharsh. I work with Advanta IRA. I've been with the company. Actually, this week is a mark of 7 years since September of 2016 when I started with Advanta. And I've served in a number of years as a client account manager. So my day-to-day job used to be processing payment transactions for my clients and answering their questions as it relates to different investment strategies and different intentions they have with their retirement dollars. But about 3 years ago or so, I switched to the business development role I currently serve in and do a lot of education and networking just to expand the information and knowledge about self-directed investing to people like yourselves, and also in my local region. I'm here in Western North Carolina, so anything Eastern Tennessee, Northern South Carolina, Virginia, anything within a few hours drive, I typically try to get out and boots on the ground, shake hands with investors and meet different people in the investing community. My guest today is Jennifer Barner. She is located in the central part of the country in around Kansas City. She's the founder of Lighthouse Ventures, and she's also the host of the Mastering Money for Moms podcast. Jennifer, thank you very much for joining me today. Anything else you'd like to spotlight in your background or experience in the investing world?
No, I'm just super excited to be here, and I will give the audience a little bit more background on me here in a little bit. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Yep, of course. I'm very happy to have you. I know you've had me on as a guest on your podcast, so I really want to plug that. If you're a woman in the investing world, specifically a mom potentially, go check out Jennifer's podcast. It's a great resource for you, and I'm sure you'll find episodes, either the one that I did with Jennifer or other guests that she's had that bring great expertise to the table. So go check that out, and also check out Lighthouse Ventures for what they have going on as far as investments as well. Today's agenda is going to cover what is a self-directed retirement account. I'm going to overview the process of setting up one of these accounts and how to get started investing. Then I'm going to cover a little bit more specifically how to use these accounts for real estate investing. Depending on my timing, we may have a case study on how to purchase a piece of rental property in your retirement account. But the real important part today is we're going to have Jennifer cover unlocking the path to single family investment success. And once we wrap up with Jennifer's portion of the presentation, we will address your questions in a full conclusion. So I do want to let the audience know you will be muted for the duration of today's presentation, but we do want you to participate. So please find in your GoToWebinar panel a box labeled questions. That is where I'd like you to use your ability to type in any questions you have to interact with us. Again, for the continuity and getting through the presentation, we're going to go through the entire presentation from my portion and Jennifer's portion, and then we're going to address your questions at the end with the time we have. Just a brief disclaimer, everything we're here to provide to you today is for educational purposes. We're not endorsing or promoting any specific products or investments or opportunities. All of the information and materials are educational. We do implore you to always consult with your own professionals, your own CPAs, attorneys, tax preparers, financial advisors before you engage in any specific investment opportunity. So just describing self-directed retirement accounts. Most people are not even aware that these accounts exist. To be clear, only about 4% of US-based retirement accounts are currently being self-directed. And that's an industry that has just about $40 trillion in it. When you add up the IRAs, the 401ks, any US-based retirement plan, total up to roughly 40 trillion, and only 4% of that dollar amount is being utilized in self-directed strategies. It's something that has been around for a number of years, just people aren't aware of, because their current custodians or financial advisors, fiduciaries as another term, prefer you to only know that you can invest with them into publicly traded stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. They don't really want you to know that you have the power and ability to take your retirement funds into your own hands and do your own due diligence and find your own unique investment opportunities. That's what Advanta is here for. We're a self-directed administrator, so we let you, within IRS rules and compliance, which what we are experts in, make investments at your own discretion into the asset classes you have knowledge about or have interest in. Again, real estate's what we're kind of hyper focusing on today, but there are other asset classes you can hold in a self-direct account. You can hold paper, basically mortgages or promissory notes, private placements or syndication investments we'll touch on very briefly today. Precious metals, foreign currency, futures trading, and pretty much anything that's not a life insurance policy or a hard to value collectible. It's a little bit of foreshadowing. I'll get into what you can and cannot invest into in the IRS rules in a few more slides. So the type of plans that can be self-directed are pretty much the plans that you're most familiar with, your traditional or your Roth IRA plans. If you're a small business owner, you can also self-direct a SEP IRA or a simple IRA, or even have a solo 401k plan if you've got an entity that is only being utilized by yourself and or your spouse, meaning you have no W-2 wage earners or rank and file employees, then a solo 401k plan may be a good fit for you. And we also allow the self-direction of education savings accounts or covered education accounts. CISA is a term that's commonly used for those types, and health savings accounts or HSA accounts, whether it's a single plan for yourself or a family plan covering your whole household. If you're someone that qualifies for a high deductible health policy, an HDHP, then you can have a health savings account and actually self-direct the funds in that account. Those two, the education and the health savings accounts, have extra tax advantages beyond the standard IRA plans. So if you're someone that has a young one in your life or has the high deductible health policy, those are great resources for tax strategy savings. Why do people choose to self-direct? So first, you have to even learn that this is an option and that it exists. Then apply these principles is how most people end up choosing to self-direct. Someone's already an active investor and they find that this is a new source of capital they can apply to their investment goals and strategies they've already been working on. Someone's fatigued in the stock market and just tired of the fluctuation of those publicly traded assets. So they either diversify a portion of their portfolio or sometimes move most of their portfolio into alternative assets that they have a little bit more understanding, control, and frame of reference regarding what the market and industry looks like. And then the tax benefits. We'll get into this a little bit more thoroughly, but when you're making investments with your retirement account, there are certain tax benefits that you're creating, like deferring the tax on traditional investments until later in life when you take that money out of the retirement account. Or if you're investing with a Roth account, all income you're generating with that investment is growing completely tax-free, where you'll never pay taxes on it. So there are great tax benefits to using your retirement funds as opposed to personal savings or borrowing from other people to make these types of investments into real estate. Moving money into a self-direct account is very easy and very quick in most cases. In general, you're looking at about a 10 to 14 day turnaround time from making a request where the money is currently at to getting the money into the self-direct account for the purpose of making alternative investments. I'm going to elaborate a little bit further, but not read on this slide word for word. It's here for your education, but also listen to the words I'm saying. The two key ways to fund a self-direct account are by either a custodian to custodian transfer, which means you're moving money from one type of account to the same type of account with a managed or not managed custodian. So from a Fidelity account that's managed to a self-directed account at Advanta that's a traditional IRA to a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA to a Roth IRA. To do that, you just fill out the transfer request form for the receiving company. They submit it to the current company that holds your funds, and that's usually actually done within about 5 business days or so, give or take. It really depends on the current company that holds your money, what protocols and timeline they have to actually execute their request once they receive it and get the funds sent out. The other way to fund these accounts is via a rollover. Most of the time it's going to be a direct rollover where you have one type of plan that's usually a previous employer plan. Sometimes it could be a current employer plan, but in most cases, it's a job you've already left. And you initiate a distribution out of that plan for a rollover into a new qualifying plan. As long as you make the funds payable directly to your new account and you have them sent ideally to your new account, that is called a direct rollover. There is tax reporting, but there's no taxable event taking place, so no tax consequences. It's just documented on the way out of one plan and on the way into the other plan. Now, an indirect rollover, which is very similar, is a strategy where you actually take control of those funds for up to 60 days. And then as long as within 60 days you deposit them into another qualifying plan, that's called an indirect rollover. You receive no tax consequence for that. You were able to utilize your funds for up to 60 days for whatever personal purpose that you needed. And then you get it rolled into a qualified plan as an indirect rollover to move forward with other alternative investments as a retirement investor. You can only do that once every rolling calendar year, so once every 365 days. If you did that tomorrow, you'd have to wait a full year before you're allowed to do another indirect rollover. But again, just to get the point home, this is very sweet and simple, and usually a pretty quick process to get these types of accounts funded. Now, I foreshadowed earlier that I was going to go over the rules. It's very simple what the IRS does not allow you to invest into. You cannot use a retirement account, an IRA specifically, to invest into life insurance policies, and you cannot hold assets that the IRS would consider to be subjective in value, like antiques, fine wine, alcohol. A quick example I always like to give, I've got a neighbor up the road that's got an old 70s Corvette in his front yard, and it's rusty. It doesn't even have wheels that work, but he values it because he thinks a little bit of elbow grease will get it tuned up and ready to be sold at a high value. Me, I'm not a car person. I just think it's a piece of metal that should be scrapped. Something like that is an asset class that the IRS really does not want you to hold within your self-directed account. The other way the IRS restricts how you invest is by labeling certain individuals disqualified persons, and you can only interact with disqualified persons when you're going into a deal together on the same side of the table for an investment transaction. You cannot buy or sell from disqualified persons or let disqualified persons benefit from your retirement account. I'll cover that a little bit more on the next slide. Real quickly, UBIT and UDFI taxes are little known taxes that apply in some investment scenarios. That is a different topic for a different day. We've got other educational content covering that. So please reach out to me if you would like some specific information on those types of taxes. Honing in more specifically, as I just mentioned, on the disqualified persons rules, you as an individual, your spouse, and everyone on your lineal tree up and down, your parents, your grandparents, as far up as still alive, your children, your grandchildren, as far down that you're alive to see, are people that are considered disqualified. So you can't buy a piece of property from a disqualified person. If you own a piece of property, you cannot let a disqualified person either do sweat equity or manual labor on the property or rent the property from your retirement account. So those are just examples. This also applies to businesses or entities owned by disqualified persons. So you can't own a commercial use property and let a business that your spouse owns be a tenant of that property. Let's say your spouse runs a salon or something. They can't operate the salon and rent out the property from your retirement account. Here's a few examples of prohibited transactions. I pretty much just described that, so I'm not going to rest on this slide too long, just give you a second to kind of hone in on that. This session is recorded, so if you are watching live, you will be able to pick this up on our YouTube page within about a day or so and just watch at your own pace. So pause wherever you need to and go ahead and reach out to us if you have other questions. It's very important to invest with people you know. The triad of know, like, trust is extremely important with self-directed investing because, again, you're your own financial advisor. You're doing your own due diligence. It's all up to you if these investments succeed and thrive or fail and flounder. So please make sure you're building your own triad of know, like, and trust. You're investing with people that you know and you're comfortable with. You're doing your thorough due diligence, as I said earlier in the disclaimer slide as well. So as far as real estate options, there are a number of different asset classes you can choose from. We've got single family, multifamily, private syndications or private placement investments. We're going to hyper focus again today on family investing. So I'm going to cover a little bit more just on what that looks like for a retirement account investor. When you buy real estate, you're buying in the name of your retirement account, and the tax ID number on the deed of title that's recorded with the county is for your retirement account, not for you personally. All of the funds for the purchase come from the retirement account, and all of the income generated flows back into the retirement account. There's a few different ways you can structure that, so don't worry, it's not that complex or tedious. It's very simple from a general perspective. All of the bills, as I just mentioned, have to be paid from the retirement account. You can either submit those payment requests in an online portal through Advanta, and we process that within the same or the very next business day that the request is received, depending on time of day. Or you can choose to have a property manager agreement in place where they handle those things and just send the residual income earned back into your retirement account. That's completely up to you. That obviously is going to cut into your profits because you are going to have to pay that property manager, but you could otherwise serve as your own de facto property manager as long as you're not doing some of the prohibited behaviors I referenced earlier, which I'll cover right here. With repairs and maintenance on a property owned, you or your disqualified persons cannot do maintenance or work. You can't do any sweat equity related to a property held in your retirement account. Disqualified persons can't do sweat equity either. At the very least, you should be hiring a local handyman. It does not need to be a certified, licensed, plumber, electrician, so forth. That's your discretion. You may choose to for the quality and price of your work, or you may choose not to. Completely your discretion as a self-directed account holder to do as you see fit. Renting the property is also completely your discretion. You come up with the lease and you pick the tenants. Basically, once you have that all in place, you provide that to the administrator, Advanta in this case. We execute on behalf of your account, and then the property is under contract as far as a lease or a tenant goes. Their income or payments of rent will flow straight into your retirement account or straight through your property manager if you facilitate it that way. Just in the interest of time, I am going to skip the case study today, but for anyone that is interested, again, I'm going to slide through these real quick just for an example. We've got a gentleman who wants to purchase a piece of property in his self-direct account. He does make the purchase, holds the property for a few years, generates some great profit that is not subject to capital gains because this investment was made with a retirement account. Reach out to me if you want to dive deeper into the case study. Again, I want to give Jennifer her spotlight and time and attention from you guys, so I'm going to skip that for today. A little bit about Advanta. We've been around for 20 years. We've got about 10,000 active clients and just over $2.5 billion in assets under management. As I mentioned earlier, we pair each client with a client account manager. I served in that role for about 5 years. So when you have an account with us, you have a dedicated person, not just a big wirehouse call office that you have to reach out to and find out who you're speaking with today and explain your whole situation from scratch. You get one person that gets familiar with you and is able to help you very efficiently once you establish that relationship. Aside from today's webinar, we put out a lot of these educational webinars. Please feel free to check out our YouTube page. It's Advanta IRA on YouTube. We have a podcast hosted by my colleague, Alex Perney. It's called the Alternative Investing Advantage Podcast. And we also have a blog if you're interested in really specific industry standard news about the retirement investment industry. It's very sweet and simple to start an account. It only takes people about 15 minutes to complete our application. The funding, as I went over earlier, takes you roughly a week and a half to 2 weeks. That's a standard expectation for you to be able to start investing. Now, having run through all of that, and without further ado, I'm going to change the presenter over to Jennifer Barner, and she is going to take over with her portion, which is unlocking the path to single-family investment success.
Thank you for that. I'm super excited that you all are here today. This is how I got started building our wealth, and so I'm really excited to share how you can do the exact same thing, starting with single family. They always say you can't run before you crawl or walk, and so I always encourage everyone to start with single family so you get the basics before you start to run. So with that, today I'm going to share with you my journey, how I got started building a portfolio, the areas you want to avoid, or rather the homes you want to avoid, how you can go about running the numbers to ensure you're making a good profit for yourself. And then we'll discuss a little bit later here at the very end some future investment options for you. So a little bit about me. I got started in November 2015 in the Rich Dad program. And after that first year, I had completed 11 transactions. I then was thinking, how can I scale even faster? So I hired a coach in the multifamily space. I underwrote 250 deals and never got a deal done. So my coach encouraged me to go back to rehabbing and flipping homes. So that next year I did 28 homes, and I am happy to announce I just rehabbed my 44th door in 2023. I've moved over into the syndication space, where that's specifically multifamily, where I'm now the general partner and sponsor on 1,094 doors, ranging from Arkansas all the way along the southeast corridor of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And I'm also a limited partner in all of those doors. Plus, I've invested in other operations from other syndicators to the tune of 2,149 doors. So it has been a fun journey, but it all started with one single door. So that Rich Dad program introduced me to 4 different types of investment options. And back in 2008, I'm sure a lot of you can remember the collapse of our market. I used that as a driver because we were invested 100% in the stock market. And when the stock market collapsed, half of our nest egg went with it. And what that told me as a stay-at-home mom of 4 kids, that I was going to have to go back to work when my kids got closer to college age. So when I was introduced to the Rich Dad program, I immediately jumped on it, and thankfully my husband was in full support. And I signed up for that program, and I attended as many conferences as I possibly could, where they were close in proximity to our home in Kansas City and where finances permitted. 5 months later, though, I was starting to doubt myself, wondering, could I really do this? Could I get the returns that the people were sharing with us? But again, I realized that I really didn't have another option. I had to figure this out. And what I leaned on is the fact that other people had been successful in this same path that I was on, and they were getting the results I was looking for. But the thing I needed to do was to get outside my comfort zone. So that all started with home number 1. So 5 to 6 months into my learning, I was starting to get a little desperate and emotional because I had looked at 20 homes and I was coming up empty-handed. Every single offer I put in was getting upsold a good $20,000. So I found this home, and the owner had just had it on Craigslist. I didn't know that, but they had put it on the MLS. I immediately reached out to the agent, and I said, I will take it, I'll pay full price. And I got that property under contract. But the one thing I did wrong is I got really emotional and I did no negotiating. Now, it does say I bought this at $127,450. I recall when we did inspections, there was something a little off, and so they gave me a little bit of a break on that. But as you can see, I put in $3,359 of repairs. I bought this property turnkey, which means the previous owner repaired the entire thing, so it was move-in ready. This is the perfect property to put an IRA fund in because I didn't have to. Basically, it's the very first home that anyone should really get excited about because it was already turnkey. All I needed to do is have my custodian wire the funds over to purchase this, and I just need to put a renter in it. So I thought I had really hit a home run here. So you can see the total amount I invested after closing costs was $131,384. Now, of course, there's taxes and insurance that were paid out of my IRA, but my net expenses were very minimal. The renter paid to have the yard mowed or he took care of it himself, but I had $26.15 in expenses. So my gross income that I received that year was $13,500. And then once you pay off the taxes, insurance, and expenses, you're left with a net income of $10,885. Now the annual appreciation was 3.7, but I thought I did so well. I got a return of 8.3% on my investment here. Now, this is what you call the law of the first deal. The pro here is that I got the first deal done. Now, did I overpay? A little bit given the market. Now, anybody today would say, wow, you got a steal. But back then, everybody would tell you I overpaid. The second pro to come from this, though, is that I gained confidence to go about and do the next deal. I did get emotionally invested, and I would tell you that that's number one thing you don't do. You never get emotionally invested because that's the sure sign to overpay. The third thing is I had a sense of urgency. I got a renter lined up for day one because I knew we were closing. So I went ahead and I held an open house. I had all the potential renters show up on the same night, and I was able to handpick the one that I thought was the ideal tenant for this property. Unfortunately, after they moved in, we had a major water intrusion in the basement. My renter sent over a video and showed that I had a waterfall happening in the basement. And so that was my first lesson on foundations of homes and understanding the importance of keeping your gutters cleaned out and taking water away using French drains. So even though there were challenges, it really helped me get me further along on my path of progress earlier than most people probably have the chance to. So how did I fund this property? Through my IRA. Now let's look at that same property today. So today's value, you can see here, is valued at $210,000. I did convert it to a short-term rental for nurses because it's near a hospital. I did this during COVID. I spent too much money on the furniture. I kind of regret turning that into a short-term rental, but I'm now renting it at $21.95 a month. I do have to pay for utilities also. My taxes and insurance went up. You can see my net income though went from $11,000 to $20,000. I've also had an appreciation because of this hot market we're in to the tune of $83,000. So to calculate your return on investment, you would take the net income plus your appreciation and you divide that by your all-in costs. So my all-in costs after I have converted it to a short-term rental is now $142,670. But when you look at my return on investment, I've done very, very well on this. So 71%. This is a little home that I take a lot of pride in because it's where I got my start. And right behind that, my mentor came and he said, you know, you're not getting 10% on your property and you really should. And he said, you're not sticking to the 1% rule. And I said, well, I'm not familiar what you mean by the 1% rule. And he says, well, whenever you calculate your all-in costs, you should be able to rent it for your all-in, whatever you've got into it. And that determines whether or not you're making 10% on your money. So as you see here, towards the bottom where it says all-in costs, I have all-in at a $142,670. So to make 10% on my money, I should have out of the gate been renting this at $1,426, which I was at $1,100. So that's the reason I was making 8% on my money that first year. But because of appreciation, I am making really good return on this property. So the 1% rule is really key to your success on this property. So For today's sake, if I was to buy this at $210,000, I need to be able to rent it at $2,100. So hopefully you understand that. Now let's look at home number 2. This was right around the corner from home number 1. It came on the market. I was scanning the MLS and I came across this little home for $89,000. Back then it was a white house with white trim, but I knew immediately that this is a home run because I knew I could rent it for $890, sticking to the 1% rule. And so I reached out to my broker and I said, hey, I want to put this thing under contract. And she said, not until we look at it. And I said, I don't need to look at it. I know that this is a home run. But we went over there. We walked the home. You want to do your due diligence. That was good advice. You also want to scope the sewer lines, make sure, because that could have been devastating. It could have run, $5,000 to $10,000 because I had a complete concrete driveway. That could have been very expensive to repair that on such an old home. But you can see here that I was renting it at $1,300 a month. I have since converted it to a short-term lease again. But back in the day when I first started, I was receiving $12,200 in my net income, and I divide that by my all-in costs of 102. So I was making 11.9% on this property. So how'd I fund it again? Was my IRA. The only thing I had to do to this is rebuild the front porch. It was all rotted out, and I had to repaint the exterior. So today's value, it's sitting at $225,000. I have converted it to a short-term rental. I also redid the kitchen and the bathroom. So I've got another $13,700 into it. I've raised the rent to $21.95. So I'm sitting at $26,000 a year on this. And then I've got utilities that average about $250 a month. And then I've got taxes and insurance. So my net income plus the appreciation today is $140,686. Now again, to get your cash on cash, which is the very bottom formula here, you take your net income minus your expenses. So really that should say gross income minus expenses. That gives you your net income. And you take that number and divide it by your all-in costs. And you'll see here, my return on this investment is 120%. Much of that is wrapped up in that appreciation that you get from getting in on an area that's gentrifying. But this has been a really solid asset because a hospital was being built near these homes. So that's one way to ensure that your property values are going to go up, is you want to build by areas that are attracting employers, or just shopping attractions always help. So my cash on cash in this case is 16%. So I was getting smarter. Every deal I did got a little bit wiser. So on home number 3 here, this is close to downtown or a major attraction here in Kansas City. I bought this house for $113,000, but the owner was selling it for $132,000, and it was not rehabbed. But by now, I had done a couple other flips besides this one that were outside of my IRA. I was getting comfortable with materials and labor charges, so I knew exactly how much this was going to cost me to renovate it. So I had no problem pushing back on the owner and saying, I know you want $132,000, but it's only worth $113,000. And sure enough, a week later, they accepted my offer. Clearly, that's not the market we're living in today. So again, I would just caution everybody to not get emotional. There's lots of houses out there, and you can get a deal done, even in today's market. So the purchase price was $113,000. I am now today renting it at $1,600 a month. There's my taxes and insurance, my rehab costs, maintenance, So my all-in return on this asset today is sitting at 81%. So my net income today is $13,645. I had an appreciation of $97,000. My all-in costs, again, is your purchase price plus all the materials and labors, anything that you have had to put into the asset. That is how you arrive at your all-in costs. And then again, to get your net income, you simply come up with the gross income, which is your rent times 12 months. You subtract out your expenses, and that's how you come up with your net income. Divide that by your all-in costs, and that's how you get your either your cash on cash. If you want to get your complete return on investment, you add in your appreciation. How'd I fund that property? And again, this was through my IRA. So here are the lessons I learned. Is number one, the very first deal, I was very emotional. I was determined to get a deal done, but it could have cost me a lot of money. So you don't want to get emotional. Thankfully, I had time on my side and a rising market. I had a mentor also that was watching over me that gave me the insight of the 1% rule, which has really guided every single purchase I've made since that date. And then you need to stay patient because success will reward you. Could I sell these properties today and get out? I absolutely can. But what I love about this, specifically single families, is it has the ability to replace my monthly income. So when we finally get to retirement ages, we could start living off of that income. Here are some red flags though. When you go to purchase any kind of asset, I would encourage you, specifically single family. This doesn't have to do with multifamily, but in the case of single family, you want to make sure you avoid homes that are on major roadways. So if you see a double line, a yellow line on the street, I would avoid those homes. And here's the reason why. You're not going to own these homes forever. One day you're going to be a seller, and you want to put yourself in the best position possible to sell this at a profit. And you want the property to sell itself. And if it's on a major street or backs up to a highway or is next door to a fuchsia colored home or a canary yellow home or a hoarder's home, these are all going to prove more difficult to sell. Could you sell them in today's hot market? Probably. But I can tell you all the for sale signs I see today in yards, there's something wrong with the property. They're either on major thoroughfares, or the background's sloped, or the backyard's too small, or they're living next to neighbors that love to show their signs, or just all different kinds of propaganda outside the doors, which, that can go either way for you. But these are some things that I have learned from directly, and you're going to end up paying for it. There's a saying when you get into real estate, you make your money when you buy the property. And I hold true to that testimony today. And also location, location, location saves you all the time. The one lesson I didn't learn until I was starting to flip a lot of properties was sloped backyards. So we purchased 2 properties in 2019 that had sloped backyards, and we quickly realized after having renovated the entire homes that everybody, they loved the interior of the home, but as soon as they looked out the back window and they saw the slope going up, they knew that they were going to have water issues, or they had concerns about water issues in the future landing in their home. And the only way we were able to get rid of those 2 homes is by creating an attraction outside of that door that took their eye away from the slope backyard. And I'm sure you can all forecast what that is. And that was creating some kind of beautiful patio or a fire pit or something that took their eye off of the slope backyard. So those are just some lessons to learn from us that hopefully you can avoid, but these are the biggest things that will provide you success as you start purchasing single family homes. So let's talk about how to find good quality single family investments. First, I mentioned this before, you can find homes off the MLS. Just stick to the 1% rule. Zillow is also a great place when you're trying to figure out, can you rent and meet the 1% rule? You can use Zillow as a renting tool as well as a selling tool. So that is a good way to judge whether or not you're going to meet your 1% rule. Also, there's wholesalers out there. So back in 2019, when we bought 28 homes, we used one particular wholesaler that brought us home after home after home. So we were buying homes every 3 to 5 weeks. And a wholesaler, what they do is they will market an entire neighborhood saying, we buy homes. Or, I'm sure a lot of you have seen the We Buy Ugly Homes advertisement cards, or somebody may just send you a letter and say, hey, we were driving by your home and we'd like to make you an offer on your home. These are wholesalers. They pay a lot of money to advertise, and they make an acquisition fee or a wholesale fee to put the seller and you, the investor, together. And, when you start to grow your mindset and stop having a scarcity mindset, you don't mind paying other people fees if they're bringing you good products or good homes that you can make a lot of money off of. Another place where you can find wholesalers is through Facebook. You can type in real estate groups and find areas or networking groups in your area where they'll do local coffees or maybe an investment group that meets once a month. But in these groups, you'll find wholesalers. And you'll find different people that are just investors that maybe want to trade a property. So don't discount the local real estate groups. They can be really a great source of revenue for you. Now let's talk about Advanta real briefly. I will admit that I didn't know Advanta existed when I was buying all my properties, and unfortunately I use a different custodian. And what I can tell you and why I recommend Advanta to everyone is because I noticed that a lot of people that were investing in my properties, specifically my multifamily investments, were coming from Advanta. And they would submit their documentation, and within 1 to 3 days, Advanta had already started wiring the funds over. And that is something that you don't get from all custodians. I can assure you that that's unique to Advanta. So I really encourage anybody that is considering moving funds to a different custodian that you would consider Advanta for that reason. They give you personal service. They help you make the transaction quickly, and they can fund in as quickly as 2 to 3 days. So here are some other ways you can fund a deal. You can create an LLC and partner with your IRA. You can borrow from a private money lender. You can borrow from hard money lenders, and you could even leverage a life insurance policy. So now let's talk about accelerating your growth, because if you're like most people that get into single families, you'll eventually start to wonder what's next. And so like myself, you're going to wonder, how can you make your funds that you're growing in your IRA work harder for you? How can you get the velocity of your money going? And so that's where multifamily comes in. When I first started, I hired a coach and mentor in this space who said I could have a deal in 90 days. As I mentioned earlier, I underwrote 250 deals, but quite frankly, the multifamily industry was saturated here in my own backyard. So there was just too much competition with California money coming into our market. So after a year and a half, I went back to flipping homes. However, since COVID, I now have sold the bulk of those 28 homes. We flipped them. I have retained 7 of our single family homes that are around a hospital and a local college here. I'm also the limited partner in several large multifamily syndications, which I mentioned earlier, but my full focus is now on syndicating properties, and I'm now the general partner across 5 states. So I am very, very active in this space now. Here's just an idea of some of the assets we own, not all of them, but I started out with a 72 unit in Springdale, Arkansas, followed behind a property in Greensboro, North Carolina that we purchased 2 years ago. And you'll see some of the average annualized returns that you can make on these properties. So on the Springdale asset, the average annualized return will be 16 to 18%. Now, something I don't show on here is a preferred return. When you start investing in multifamily assets, a lot of them give you the opportunity to receive a preferred return, which means you will be receiving the first profits that the asset generates before anybody else in the property gets any money, specifically the general partners. So the general partners are working really hard so you get your preferred return, with the hopes that when they go to sell the asset in 3 to 5 to 7 years, depending on the market at the time, that you would receive an average annualized return somewhere between 16 and 20%, which is that second line here, average annualized return. So that's calculated simply by taking the time that you hold the asset, maybe it's 5 years, and you take the total amount of distributions, you also add on the profit, and then you take that entire sum of money and you average it back over the 5-year hold, and that's how we come up with your average annualized return of 16 to 18%. Now, distributions in most cases are paid out quarterly if you're not stabilizing an asset. So you'll see in column 3 here, Jacksonville, Florida. This is an asset where we're adding value, and we said at the start of this asset, we probably wouldn't pay out until the time we sell this asset, because we were doing a major turnover on every single unit in that property. We're now raising the rents on that asset, and you can see our asset in Atlanta is cash flowing. One in North Carolina, we're stabilizing and raising rents, and one that we purchased back at the beginning of the year, we're adding value to. So this again is just kind of a 30,000 foot view on some assets we own. To give you an idea of returns that you can make, we try to hit a projected cash on cash return somewhere between 7 and 10%, but on average it's about 9% once we get the asset stabilized. We typically hold our assets 3 to 5 years, but we try to return our money to the investors as quickly as possible, because again, that's how you get the velocity and you really grow your net worth. We typically start at a $50,000 investment on most of our properties that we put under contract. But the bigger the asset, usually that minimum investment amount goes up, and you'll see some investments require you put in $100,000, but that's because there are millions and millions of dollars to purchase. The preferred return, which I talked about briefly earlier, is 7 to 8%, and we commit to paying that on a yearly basis, and it becomes a cumulative over time. So year 1, you rarely get paid the entire 7 to 8%, so maybe you only get half of it. So in year 2, we're trying to make up for year 1 plus pay you that 7 to 8%. And so by the time you get to the sale point, we're probably still owing a little bit in arrears for the distributions that we didn't get paid out, but we make sure when we get the profit on the sale of the asset that those distributions are caught up first, and then the profit is split 70-30. That's a typical syndication. Our projected annualized returns is 16 to 20% with a targeted IRR of 14%. So here's a property that we put under contract 3 years ago. This is a deal in Atlanta. And why we like this particular asset is we got this off market and it's $10,000 under market. We were able to get a person that was selling and they were wanting to do a 1031 exchange. So they had a little flexibility in their calendar. They weren't pressed to sell this immediately because they needed to identify something else to move their funds into. It was also a highly desirable area where the market rents were $150 to $400 under the current market rent for the area. And then there was high occupancy at this property, and that's because, again, the rents were so low as compared to the other properties in the area. This is a typical exterior for an old 1967 build. Now, what's not typical is the manicured lawn and the manicured bushes. So we felt like we found a really, just a gem of a property, finding this off market. And it was 100% occupied. So again, anytime you see things that are 100% occupied, you know they're under market rent. This property is 128 units, built in 1969, and again, a 98% occupancy. So here are the projected returns. So again, when you're talking about single family, you do single family to get monthly cash flow. You do multifamily to really increase your net worth over time. And again, it's a snowball effect. It's like compounding interest. So on this particular asset, at year 3, if we were to sell today, the average annualized return is 20%. Now, the equity multiplier isn't something we've talked about, but if you were to put $100,000 into this asset, in year 3, we would return $162,000. Now, that does include your distributions, but you can see that that's a nice return on your money. And year 4, if we continue to hold it, that 100,000 would turn into 180,000. And by year 5, we're sitting really close to doubling your money. So what is a syndication? This might be a new term for you. And if it is, it's simply putting together a group of investors so you can purchase an asset together. And again, why do people do syndications? Well, it's much easier to take down a multi-million-dollar property together than trying to do it by yourself. And then you get to share in the profit. You have the ability to increase your net worth faster. There's also less risk and less involvement from a limited partner. So I've thrown out the terms limited partner and general partner a lot here today. And again, I don't want to make this about multifamily, but I do want to give you exposure, because what you're going to find when you get into single family is you're going to have success pretty quickly if you educate yourself and you follow the recipe for success and do exactly what I told you to do at the very beginning. Be very methodical about it. And then as your IRA continues to grow, you're going to be looking for places to put your capital where you can take a little more of a passive approach. And this is what I did. I started looking for deals that I could do, but when I couldn't find deals in my own backyard, I started investing in other people's deals in other markets to keep my capital growing. And that's the goal, right? Is we want to grow our IRA as much as possible, because we know that the value of the dollar decreases every day it's not put to use. So as a limited partner, you can invest passively in a deal. And this is actually my favorite type of investment, are the ones that I get to invest in passively, where somebody else is taking on the risk and having to manage the asset. So you can invest at a minimum amount as a Class A member. You receive the distributions either quarterly or monthly, and then you get a big sum of cash at the payout during the sale. Now, you can't receive tax benefits if you're investing inside your IRA, but outside of your IRA, there are tax benefits. There's also little to no involvement other than your initial investment. Now, as a general partner, which is what I am today, I am coordinating the deal, putting the team in place, managing the operations at the asset. I'm also helping raise the capital. I'm managing the property. And as a Class B investor, I receive distributions after the Class A members are paid. Now, I also receive money from putting the deal together, managing the asset, and closing with a new buyer. However, I will also tell you that every single deal that I put together, I invest in my own deals and I raise capital in my own deals also. Because I think if a good operator is standing behind their investment, they're going to do those things. So how can you find a deal to invest in passively once you get your single families up and running? Once all that single family cash flow, monthly cash flows coming in, you're going to be looking for places to put this. So you're going to want to find out who's doing other deals in your area. How could you be investing in their single family homes that they're doing or flips that they're doing? But also don't neglect to go to your own networking events in your own backyard, or get on a plane and go vacation somewhere and hit a real estate conference. They're everywhere throughout the US. And you can get one, you could probably attend one once a month if you really wanted to. Also, there's podcasts out there of people educating you in this space. And then obviously there's LinkedIn. And if you see somebody like myself advertising on LinkedIn, they're doing what you call a 506c, which means that's crowdfunding, and they can advertise. And there's no restrictions to doing that. They just need to make sure that you're accredited. And I won't get into the weeds on that, but if you want to reach out to me personally, I'm happy to educate you a little bit further. But if you decide to start investing some of that monthly cash flow that you're getting from your single family homes, you want to ask the general partner what their experience has been. How much tenure do they have in this space? Do they have money in the deal? And are they raising capital? Those are really important points to note so that you make sure you're investing with a good person that has a lot of experience. So questions to ask yourself is, what's the hold time? If I don't get my money back, what will be the impact on me financially? So think about that. If you invested $50,000 into a property and you didn't get it back because of some catastrophic event, would that bankrupt you? And if so, maybe you take a little longer to generate more cash flow out of your single families before making that financial commitment. And then do your own due diligence. Make sure you attend the webinar. You want to do your own market analysis to make sure the area is growing like they forecasted and that the rents are actually achievable. But it all begins with the first step. And again, I encourage anybody that wants to get into real estate that you start with a single family home or a duplex. Get your feet wet. Make sure you understand what it's like to rent to a renter. Make sure you understand what it takes to renovate. I think those are all critical things. But whatever you do, don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. I was at a real estate networking event and I met a Tony Robbins Platinum partner. And I was really enamored by the success he had had in the space. And as I got some time one-on-one with him, he said, Jennifer, look around the room here. He said, 85% of the people in this room have been here for 5 years and they've never done a deal. So whatever you do, even if it means getting a little emotional, take the first step get a deal done, and it's going to accelerate your growth in the space so that you can have financial freedom. And to wrap up, I'm going to tell you that I'm proud to announce that I mentioned earlier I have 4 children, and one of the reasons I went into this space is because I knew we didn't have enough money to put all of our kids through school debt-free, which was always very important to my husband and I. After I got into this space, I am happy to announce we just graduated our 4th born through college, all of them going through college debt-free. And we're at a really exciting season in our life because we're now educating other people about how to do this same thing and how to really grow your net worth to where you liberate yourselves and have options in life. So if you want to learn more about me or connect with me one-on-one, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And as Corey mentioned, I have a podcast called Mastering Money for Moms. It's a passion for me to educate moms on how to master their finances and not leaving it up to just their husband to take care of them and their family, but to play an integral role in that as well. So thank you again, Corey, for having me on. I appreciate it so much. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, Jennifer, thank you so much. Go ahead and leave your slide up there with your contact information. We'll run through the Q&A portion real quickly. I did answer a few of the questions in the chat because some of them more so just related to self-directed questions, but let me run through them all right now. There's a few that I'll just say my answer out loud and a few that I'll pivot to your attention. But first off, thank you so much for all that information and education. It was a really great growth point from single family building that portfolio to the next logical step for most investors, which is turning their attention to multifamily and bigger projects. So I think that the flow and just the overall arc here of today's presentation was very, very intuitive and very helpful to our audience, which we thank you so much for. I see a few hands raised in the hand raise feature. If you're someone that's used the hand raise feature, please jot your question down in the questions box, so we'll be identifying and addressing those. And without any further ado, I'm going to try to run through these relatively quickly and consolidate a few. Is there a limit to how much per year you can contribute to the SDIRA? And then a separate but related question came in. What did you do to get the 120K in the account to purchase that house? I believe that was referring to one of Jennifer's examples. So first off, the annual contribution for an IRA account, traditional or Roth, in this year, 2023, is $6,500 or $7,500 if you're over age 50. That's a $1,000 limit and addition of ordinary earned income. You have to show earned income to be able to contribute, and those are the limits for this year. As far as how do you get such a high balance in an account so that you can make these style of investments of purchasing a physical piece of real estate? Well, you're able to consolidate and roll over, as I mentioned in my portion of the presentation, funds from other plans. So if you had a job and you were contributing to a 401k and you stepped away from that job, whatever money you had in that 401k plan can be moved into a self-direct account. So if you consider a lifetime of working and contributing into various retirement products and or just a few years of building up your $6,500 or $7,500 annual limit, that's how you add up to a high enough balance so that you don't need to partner with someone or utilize a leverage strategy to purchase a piece of real estate. And that rolls me right into another question I received a few different times, was regarding using an IRA as a down payment versus a full purchase price, or utilizing leverage or lending capacity when a retirement account's an investor. Those are specific caveats and nuances. You can't necessarily use a retirement account as a down payment, but you can be a partner in an investment with your retirement account and partner with others. If the investment does require leverage or require lending, you will have to make sure that the terms of the loan are non-recourse, because the IRA in itself cannot borrow and sign a personal guarantee. So there are some additional nuances. A colleague of mine and I put out a webinar specifically titled pretty much using IRA as a down payment that breaks down what you're trying to accomplish and what you can actually do relative to the IRS rules. So feel free to check that out on Advanta's YouTube page. And then again, if you're selling properties you can't afford outright or don't have partners to go in on the deal with, you can utilize leverage. You'll just have to make sure it's non-recourse lending. And again, we can provide you some additional information and resources on that in itself as a separate capacity.
Hey, Corey.
Someone reached out. Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, also, my husband and I, at the very beginning, we had to buy that very first house 50-50. So we spent 50% of the purchase price, which was $127,000. 50% came from my husband's IRA, 50% from my IRA. And then on the second house, I bought 90% of it. My husband contributed 10. And on the third house, my husband bought 100% of the house. So, you know, those are some things to think through, getting creative on how can you get that deal done. So hopefully that helps whoever asked that question as well.
No, that's a perfect example of partnering your resources together and a great concept for people to grasp. The next question that kind of relates to that, does a sibling count a disqualified person? The answer is no. Siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, for one reason or another, the IRS does not consider those relatives disqualified. It's just your parents, your grandparents, your children, your grandchildren. So you can interact with those other non-lineal descendants or ascendants, whereas with disqualified persons, again, you can partner with them, but you can't be on the other side of a transaction from them. Another question I see here, please explain the difference in general and limited partnership. Actually, I know that you covered that. That question came in much earlier today. Any tips on acquiring single-family homes in this period of low housing inventory? And Jennifer, before you answer that, there's another question that related very similarly. How can we identify good locations out of the area where we live? The area I live in is too expensive and doesn't meet the 1% rule. If you'd like to kind of address the two of those concurrently.
Yeah, so when I got started, I was looking at the Kansas City market at large, and what I realized is I was becoming, I had paralysis. And so what somebody suggested is go where other people are having success. So if you don't know a market, I would suggest you start around a hospital or an area of attraction where you know there's good places where people want to live. Right now, a lot of times that can become unaffordable really quickly, which is probably the point you're trying to make. So something Trulia used to do, they don't do this anymore, is a crime map. But you can go to, I think it's called spotcrime.com, and you can look at a geographical map and see really quickly, you can put in a zip code and find out if there's crime in the area you're trying to buy in. Now, obviously there's crime everywhere, right? But the geographical map will show you where there's a lot of crime, probably more than what you're safe to purchasing in. And my rule of thumb is if I didn't feel safe going there, then I certainly didn't want my contractors going there. Another tool you might try is zipsmart.ia, or excuse me, AI. Somebody just told me about that. It shows you where you can get cash flow. I haven't used that. They just told me about it. So it might be an area where you could use, but spot crime's always been a place that I've used. It also can tell you, one other thing I would suggest is, I think it's called data.gov. Since I'm not on I don't have my browser up, I usually just keep them all saved, so I apologize. But in today's housing market, I would encourage you use Redfin or Zillow and really hone in on what the prices are in the area. And if you see a dip somewhere, that's going to be a really great home that you're going to be able to renovate. So for example, if all the area houses are somewhere between 150 and 300,000. And then all of a sudden you see one that's selling for 90,000. Okay, well, why is that? Well, it's probably a house somebody's trying to get rid of. But one of the best seasons to buy a house is between October 1st and February 1st. And why is that? Because everyone that's selling in that time frame is desperate. So we're coming on some really good times in the market to take advantage of periods when people have to move for whatever reason. So hopefully those are some little tips that you could be, watching for. But I always encourage people, if you're not ready to buy, but you know you're going to be buying in the future, in the near future, start looking at the MLS now. Start getting acquainted with a zip code or a particular area now, so you can see when the market is declining in that particular zip code. That's how you always win in real estate.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for that tip. I've got one last question that we'll ask of you, Jennifer, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up, just to be mindful of the audience's time and everyone for participating with us live. Last question calls back some of the information you had early in your presentation describing the return on investment thresholds and kind of running through the numbers of the deal. Is there an return on investment threshold investors should seek before considering a sale or exit strategy? And then I'm also adding, assuming the appreciation is a heavier factor here when you're talking about maybe exiting a specific single family or like a duplex, as you mentioned, an actual smaller real estate project. Can you just expand on that a little bit, kind of what the exit strategy could look like for investors?
That is a great question, but honestly, it's a personal question. I was ready to be out of single families 5 years ago, but my husband really likes the idea of monthly cash flow. So when we hit retirement age, at some point, we're going to be able to start taking those, and they won't have to flow into the IRA, right? Well, they will, but we'll be able to pull on those. I think I would set out to, set your criteria before you buy it. What do you have to get out of it? And how are you going to decide? Decide in advance what that criteria looks like. So when you hit it, you know it's time to sell. I think that's what I would do. Again, I would have already sold these and taken advantage of the high in the market, but who's to say that we've hit the high? With the short supply on the market right now, we may have further rise to go, but it doesn't mean you can't get in the market now. I can tell you back in 2016, when I bought those 3 homes, everybody thought we were at the height of the market and we were just getting going. So same could be said today. So I hope that helps a little bit.
No, I think that answer in itself really sums up the nature of self-directed investing, right? Set your own criteria and your own precedents for what you want to do and when you may want to do it. And also, be adaptable to that effect as market conditions change. So make sure the individual has their own expectations and their own game plan, but also keep that a little bit flexible just in case the criteria changes, any major events, or as we went through between 2016 and now, a global pandemic occurs, that you have some sort of opportunity and action plan to not let the investment completely, fail out on you. So yeah, let's go ahead and have that be our closing point. Again, Jennifer, thank you so much for your information and education. I really hope that the audience reaches out to you and checks out your podcast. Is there any final parting words that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I would just say, again, don't get stuck in paralysis. Just go ahead and start taking the first step. You'll figure it out along the way, and it'll give you the momentum you need to keep on growing that portfolio that will provide financial freedom in the future. It's sooner than you think.
All right. Well, thank you so much, as always, for putting together some educational content. I hope we've been able to impact some people here with our presentation. To all of you that participated, thank you so much. If you want to watch the recording, it will be on the YouTube page, advantaira.com. You can find it there as well.